What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Check this out, y'all. Core Democratic groups are preparing to be targeted by the Trump administration. Oh, they're in fear. They're running for the hills, actually. We've got a lot to get into on this one. This is quite the hefty news article. So I'm going to try to keep my interjections light on this one, if you will. But let's get into it right quick, because this is fascinating, y'all. Check it out. As President Donald Trump pushes the historical boundaries of executive power, some of the Democratic Party's core political institutions are preparing for the possibility that the federal government may soon launch criminal investigations against them. What does that tell you right off the jump, folks? Yeah, they're probably guilty. I'm gonna throw my bias in there right quick. That's just my bias speaking. And like I said, I'm gonna try to keep those brief. The Democrats' dominant national fundraising platform, Act Blue, and the party's largest protest group, Indivisible, are working with their attorneys for such a scenario, according to officials within both organizations. Trump's top political allies have suggested both groups should face prosecution. Yeah, and we've seen evidence as to bear that out. As a matter of fact, right here on this channel, we've seen the James O'Keefe investigations into Act Blue. That needs to be investigated, as a matter of fact. Other Democratic allies are planning for Trump-backed legal crackdowns as well. Wary of antagonizing the Republican president, most prefer to stay anonymous for now. No, they're definitely not wary of antagonizing Donald Trump. That's all they've been doing ever since he came into office. Every one of our clients is concerned about being arbitrarily targeted by the Trump administration. I'm sorry. You're not being arbitrarily targeted. There is evidence to show malfeasance, so we're going to investigate that. That is the federal government's job, actually. We are going to great lengths to help clients prepare for or defend themselves, said Ezra Reese, political law chair at Elias Law Group, which represents Democratic groups and candidates and is chaired by Mark Elias, the lawyer who has himself been a Trump target. Yeah, funny that is, right? An FBI spokesperson declined to comment when asked about potential investigations into Act Blue and Indivisible. But White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt did not downplay the threat of a potential criminal probe when asked specifically whether Trump wants the FBI, the Treasury Department, or any other federal agency to investigate Democratic groups. That is right. That is because there is evidence of malfeasance once again. But the Associated Press, they're not going to tell you this. They're not going to tell you about James O'Keefe investigating Act Blue and finding that several people did not know that they were donating to Act Blue. Several, like dozens of people, to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars. They had no idea that they donated that much, 5 to 10 times a day in some cases. Like, how do you not know that you donate money to a Democratic fundraising organization 5 to 10 times a day? And aside from that, why would you donate that many times to a Democratic fundraising organization that many times a day? It just doesn't make any sense. So yes, that absolutely needs to be investigated, and Indivisible needs to be investigated because Indivisible is the funding behind all of these protests at the Tesla dealerships where violence has broken out. Yes, as a matter of fact, if we find that Indivisible is responsible for people going to Tesla and vandalizing Tesla dealerships and vandalizing people's Teslas, their personal Teslas, I think that deserves investigation as well. But the Associated Press is not going to tell you these things. So what is it? It's left up to people like me to interject with that into the article to let you know that Donald Trump is not just arbitrarily going after these people, right? Once again, as we see from the Associated Press time and time and time again, anytime Donald Trump makes a claim, they say, oh, it's an unfounded claim, or Donald Trump says this without evidence. They never do this for the opposition. Once again, like when he said arbitrarily going after, they should have said he says this without evidence, or unfounded claims of the federal government going after them arbitrarily. But they don't do that, folks. They never do that. Anyone who has not broken the law should not be worried, Levitt told the Associated Press. If you have broken the law and engaged in the weaponization of justice, then you should be worried. It's that simple. Indeed, far from distancing themselves from talk of retribution, many key Republicans are embracing it. Now, once again, that is an opinion statement. And that is not a statement from somebody that the Associated Press is talking to. That is obviously not Caroline Levitt. That is from the Associated Press themselves. This is not news, folks. This is all opinion. Think about the headline for a second. This is an opinion. They included the statement from the Indivisible leader, I believe. I believe that was from the Indivisible leader. So, or, somebody, one of the higher ups, if you will, of Indivisible. They included that statement, and they didn't put without evidence or none of that stuff. But that is a statement from the Associated Press themselves. Indeed, far from distancing themselves from talk of retribution. Now, that's what the Associated Press is calling criminal activity. That's right, because that's what they're going to be investigated for, is the criminal activity that they have allegedly conducted. And they're calling that retribution, folks. This is the bias of the news. Now, sure, once again, I talk about this all the time, and in full transparency, I have a bias. And I let you guys know I have a bias. I'm not going to lie to you guys. But I'm going to read the news, then give you my opinion on it. And when I notice some malfeasance going on, some sort of manipulation by the corporate press to try to skew a story in a certain direction, I am going to point that out. This is what I do, as a matter of fact. I mean, you can clearly see that's what I'm doing here, right? Trump's allies argue they are justified in seeking vengeance due to the 4 criminal prosecutions against Trump, one of which led to multiple felony convictions in New York. There's no evidence then President Joe Biden influenced the Trump prosecutions in any way. That is a lie. That entire thing is a lie. Because, once again, it's based upon the idea that Donald Trump is criminally investigating crimes because he was investigated. You get where this is going? That's how they drummed all this up. Trump's allies argue they are justified in seeking vengeance. Once again, now they're calling vengeance. They're calling crime vengeance. The Trump administration, the federal government, are responsible for carrying out the laws in this country, upholding the Constitution, for crying out loud. Right? So, in the eyes of the Associated Press, if the criminal or the alleged criminal in any situation is the political rival of Donald Trump, then it is vengeance against them. This is the heavy manipulation that we see in the news these days, folks. This is wildly absurd. This is wildly skewed to the left. Manipulated like crazy. Matt Schlapp, president of the American Conservative Union, said Democrats needed to be taught not to touch a hot stove. That's right, you don't go out and commit crimes, essentially. Someone needs to get burned for all this activity, or they're just going to do it again, he said. And that's not hypocrisy, that's justice. That is right, that is what I've been saying. It's not Donald Trump seeking retribution. What did Act Blue do to Donald Trump for him to go after Act Blue? Nothing. If Donald Trump was going after Alvin Bragg, then you could call into question, maybe this is retribution, and I would probably agree with you on that. But is he going after Alvin Bragg? Is he going after Jack Smith? Is he going after, what's her name? The Attorney General in New York. I forget her name right off the top of my head. Is he going after the people that went after him? No, he's not, actually. He's going after other places, right? So, what does that tell you? It's not retribution. It's not vengeance. It's the federal government doing its job. And I'm sorry, I know I said I was going to try to not interject in this because we got a lot to get through. But holy crap, this thing is so manipulative. Sorry about that, y'all. I have a way with words. And when I say I have a way with words, that means sometimes I can't say them. It is what it is, though, right? It's always going to be that. Trump has made no secret of his plans to use the power of the federal government to target domestic political adversaries. When has he said anything of the sort? He never said he was going to do so. He said he would be justified in doing so. But, yeah, we've seen no evidence that he's going after domestic political adversaries, actually. Because Act Blue and Indivisible are not political adversaries. Act Blue is a fundraising organization, and Indivisible is a protest organizer. They're not political adversaries. Sorry. But, once again, during a norm-breaking speech, why don't you just say an abnormal speech? At the Department of Justice last month, Trump cast himself as the country's chief law enforcement officer, a title ordinarily reserved for the Attorney General. Yeah, but who does the Attorney General, what branch of government does that fall under? Like, who is the Attorney General's boss? It's the President. Yes, the President takes an oath to uphold the Constitution, for crying out loud. These people are insane. They really are. On April 9th, Trump signed an executive order instructing the Justice Department to investigate Miles Taylor, a former Department of Homeland Security official who anonymously penned a book highly critical of his first presidency. Trump said that Taylor was likely guilty of treason, a crime that can carry the death penalty. Why did they throw that in there? Like, seriously, do they ever do that? Do they ever say, oh, well, this crime could carry a penalty of 10 months in jail or 15 months in jail? You know what they're trying to do here. Indivisible has been perhaps the most important group in the Democratic resistance since Trump returned to the White House. Is that so? Doesn't sound like it to me. Democratic resistance? What, by protesting? No, Democratic resistance would be in Congress or these activist judges. Not a bunch of people vandalizing Teslas at a Tesla dealership. Oh, gosh. The group's leadership in Washington holds regular calls with state-based activists and recently released a detailed protest guide which offers specific guidance to hundreds of local chapters across the country. This year alone, Indivisible groups have hosted more than 1,000 protests covering every state in the nation. The group was a key organizer in the recent hands-off protests that attracted hundreds of thousands of people across the country. Trump top advisor and billionaire Elon Musk has publicly condemned Indivisible as criminals. Yeah, because they are funding the protests that lead to violence and vandalism and terrorism, as a matter of fact, in some cases. The statement was an apparent reference to violent attacks against Tesla dealerships and vehicles, which have spiked in recent weeks. Have spiked? No, they've been spurred on by these protests. Spiked. No, they are directly tied to the protest that is directly tied to Indivisible. Like, the Associated Press just admitted that. But they're trying to spin it in a different direction, aren't they? Indivisible's leadership released a guide earlier in the year encouraging protests outside Tesla dealerships, although the guide instructs protesters to remain peaceful and stay off private property. Do you think they're going to issue a guide that tells people to go be violent? No, of course not. They're never going to do that. But you have people like Jimmy Kimmel, Jimmy Fallon, all these late night show hosts, right? Laughing about all this, making jokes about the vandalism, the terrorism that's going on at these Tesla dealerships, for crying out loud. So do you think that makes it okay? That they say, oh, well, you know what? I don't condone any violence, and that comes from deep down within my legal department at NBC or whatever. That's what was one of the jokes, by the way. I know I butchered it, but it doesn't matter because the point still brings up. He didn't say it comes from him. It comes from his legal department. So that means he had to say that he doesn't condone violence. That's the joke. That's where we get, oh, okay, so you do condone violence. Essentially, you just can't say it. That's the message that these people are putting out. I mean, you've got these people all over the internet, all over the place, right? Like Taylor Lorenz getting on and calling Luigi Mangione a morally righteous guy, for crying out loud. What? It's insane. And they say the right is the violent one. Oh, right-wing violence is pervasive in this country. We've seen nothing but left-wing violence. The only thing you can point to that was from the right was January 6th. And yeah, that was bad, y'all. I ain't gonna lie. That was bad. But you know what? The reason we get so riled up about January 6th is because so many people, so many innocent people were caught up in that. Served time in prison over that. You didn't see waves of BLM protesters getting arrested. No, as a matter of fact, just the opposite. You saw Democratic leadership setting up GoFundMe accounts to bond these people out of jail and have their legal defense paid for. It's insane, y'all. The left is insane. Every accusation is a confession. So if they say right-wing violence, you know they're talking about themselves. Insane, y'all. No charges are known to have been filed against Indivisible or its leaders yet. That's what the investigation is for, Associated Press. But Indivisible co-founder Ezra Levin says it's critical that democratic institutions work together to speak out against the threats posed by the Trump administration. His organization has been discussing contingency plans with attorneys and other activists in the event that he or other Indivisible leaders face criminal charges. They may try to come get us directly, or it's as likely that their non-state actors are inspired by their lies and propaganda and try to come at us individually, Levin said. And that is a risk in a moment where you're facing anti-democratic threats like we are. Yeah, okay, so I get the pun here. Anti-democratic threats. That means a Republican is investigating the Democrat. Because Republicans are anti-democrat. It's insane what they do here. Our choice is we can be quiet and hope that they won't target us, or we can try to work as a mass opposition, he continued. If you're not willing to do that, what are you doing here? It's insane what they're advocating for, y'all. Musk, backed by several Republican members of Congress, has also called on the FBI to investigate Act Blue, alleging that the Democratic Party's main fundraising platform has skirted campaign finance laws and allowed foreign nationals to make illegal contributions to Democratic candidates. Yes, and what he's referring to there is some of the evidence they found that USAID was sending money to NGOs that sent money to Act Blue. Now, they can't connect the dots on that because once the money left USAID and went to that NGO, there was no more oversight of those federal dollars. So we don't know exactly if those federal dollars were spent on Act Blue, which eventually tied back to Democratic lawmakers, actually. But the evidence that USAID was funding NGOs that were funding Act Blue, that right there by itself is plenty of room for investigation. Not to mention all the other malfeasance going on with USAID and Act Blue. That has nothing to do with what I was talking about earlier, as a matter of fact. I think the FBI is going to do something on Act Blue soon. Charlie Kirk, a key Trump ally who founded the conservative group Turning Point USA, said at a political event last month in Wisconsin. Act Blue officials this week told the AP that they would continue to fully cooperate with a congressional investigation led by House Republicans into allegations of fraud within the organization. That is right. That derives from James O'Keefe. That's what I was talking about earlier. Yet Republicans in the House are investigating Act Blue currently as we speak. Republican investigators have recently requested that Act Blue staffers testify behind closed doors in addition to providing a second batch of documents. Even before the congressional investigation concludes, multiple House Republicans have encouraged federal law enforcement agencies to pursue requested criminal investigations into Act Blue. Rep. Darrell Issa has asked the Treasury Department to investigate allegations that the nonprofit processed payments to terror-linked organizations. Separately, Rep. Andy Biggs sent a letter to the FBI last month claiming that Act Blue is being used to skirt the integrity of federal campaign finance laws by allowing foreign nationals to contribute to campaigns, among other allegations of criminal wrongdoing. I wonder why they're not spelling out all these allegations. They're just kind of brushing over it right quick. It must be emphasized that these allegations, were they to prove true, would indicate a serious threat to the integrity of our elections, besides the victimization of American citizens, Biggs wrote. Act Blue said it's preparing for the possibility of many different attacks on various fronts, including investigations by the FBI or the Treasury Department. Meanwhile, Democratic candidates are relying on Act Blue to fund their campaigns as never before, all tying this all up with a nice bow. Just lovely. Love how the Associated Press is absolutely telling on Act Blue here. And you notice they put all this toward the end of the article. This is the last little section, by the way. It's all at the end. Everything else from before was all pro Act Blue and pro Indivisible. All the statements were pro Democrat. Now we're finally getting the other side of the story all the way at the end of the article, y'all. Donors have given more than $400 million to Democratic candidates through Act Blue over the first 3 months of the year, the organization told the AP. The fundraising haul represents the most money raised in any first quarter in Act Blue's 2-decade history. What does that tell you, folks? While Republicans accuse the groups of being funded by wealthy donors, Act Blue acts as a pass-through between donors and candidates that fund by a 3.95%. That's funded by a 3.95% processing fee on each donation. Now, what's funny about that last little paragraph there is, where's the logic in that? Where's the logical structure for that? Like, right, get this. Let's read it again slowly. And let's get this. While Republicans accuse the group of being funded by wealthy donors, and that's not a period, there's a comma right there, so pause. Act Blue acts as a pass-through between donors and candidates that's funded by a 3.95% processing fee on each donation. What do those two things have anything to do with each other? Nothing. Nothing whatsoever. They're telling you that they charge a processing fee and that Republicans are accusing them of underhanded tactics, essentially. Malfeasance. Fraud, if you will. What does that have to do with any of it? Once again, folks, this is all structured in such a way to manipulate you into leaning in a certain direction. Once again. Like I said, they structure these specifically for that reason, right? Like they phrase things in a certain way. They leave one side at the beginning of the article and then wait to give you the rest of the story all the way at the end. They don't give you the opposition until all the way at the end, when they know that there's going to be several sections that come in between this that make it look like the end of the article. They do this intentionally. They put ads, but they also, what they do, and I'll take a screenshot and throw it up right here, a little screenshot. I'll video record it and scroll through so you can see what I'm talking about. They'll put links for more news articles. Like they'll put 3 or 4 links to make you think that the news article is over with. But if you keep scrolling, you'll see the rest of the story. That is done intentionally to not lead you to the rest of the story, right? And they can get out from doing this because, well, that's just an ad for more news articles, or that was just an advertisement, blah, 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 blah. But come on, we're not blind here. We can see what you're doing. You don't use certain phrases when you're referring to one group, but you insert them as many times as you can when referring to another group. Like I was talking about earlier with the, said this without evidence or unfounded claims of something. Democrats never ever have an unfounded claim of anything, or Democrats never ever say things without evidence. But Republicans always have unfounded claims of everything, and they always say everything without evidence. That's just how they roll, folks. And that right there should tell you that something funny is going on with this. That maybe we should look into this a little bit deeper. And it sucks, because to get to the bottom of the story, you have to go and read left-wing news, and then you have to go and read right-wing news, and then figure out who is lying. Right? Or you have to go and do research just to learn the truth of a single news story. It's absurd, y'all. And we shouldn't have to be put through this, essentially, is what I'm getting at. This is all just insanity incarnate. And it's so messed up what our news publications have come to in this country. That they have to be categorized as left-wing and right-wing and centrist. It's insane, y'all. It really is, and my voice is starting to go out. So, I want y'all to let me know what y'all think about all this. That's all I got on this one. I want to thank everybody for watching. And y'all try to have a good day. Stay legitical. Peace.